The stage rattled into El Paso, Texas on a scorching August afternoon in 1878, and when the dust settled, Isaac Montgomery watched a young woman step down with a grace that seemed impossible after 3 days of travel across the desert, her hand immediately reaching back to help an elderly woman whose silver hair caught the sunlight like spun silk. Isaac had been leaning against the post outside the general store, his hat pulled low against the glare, but something about the way the younger woman steadied her mother made him straighten up. He had seen plenty of folks arrive in El Paso over his 30 years, most of them chasing dreams of land or gold or escape from something they would not name. But this woman moved with purpose, scanning the town with eyes that took in everything while revealing nothing, her free arm wrapped protectively around the older woman's waist. The stage coach driver hauled down 2 worn trunks and a carpet bag, setting them in the street with more force than necessary. The younger woman pressed coins into his palm with a quiet thank you, then guided her mother toward the shade of the nearest awning. Isaac noticed the way she positioned herself between the son and the elderly woman, how she produced a handkerchief to dab at her mother's forehead with tender efficiency. "Excuse me," the younger woman called out, her voice carrying across the street with a clear confidence that made several heads turn. "Could someone direct me to the land office?" Isaac found himself pushing off the post and crossing the dusty road before he had fully decided to move. Up close, he could see the younger woman was perhaps 24 or 25, with dark hair pinned back beneath a practical bonnet and eyes the color of strong coffee. Her mother looked to be in her 60s, frail but alert, watching everything with a kind of quiet dignity despite her obvious exhaustion. "Land office is 2 buildings down," Isaac said, touching the brim of his hat. "But Mr. Henderson usually closes up around this time for his dinner. If you are looking for property, I might be able to help. Isaac Montgomery. I run a ranch about 5 miles west of town." The younger woman studied him with an assessing gaze that made Isaac feel like she was reading every truth and lie he had ever told. After a moment, her expression softened slightly. "Laura Brennan. This is my mother, Margaret Brennan. We have come from Missouri to claim a property my late uncle left us, a small homestead, supposedly with a house and some acreage. Your uncle would not be Samuel Brennan, would it?" Isaac asked, recognition sparking in his memory. Laura's eyes widened. "You knew him, knew of him. He kept to himself mostly, but he was honest in his dealings at the feed store, passed about 6 months back, if I recall right. I am sorry for your loss." Margaret Brennan spoke for the first time, her voice papery but warm. "Samuel was my younger brother. We had not seen him in nearly 20 years, but he wrote to us regular. When he passed, his lawyer contacted Laura. We decided to make a fresh start." Isaac glanced at the 2 trunks sitting in the street, at the way Laura kept one hand on her mother's elbow even while conversing with him, at the determined set of her jaw beneath the weariness. "That homestead is in rough shape, Miss Brennan. Samuel was a good man, but he was not much for upkeep the last few years. The roof has holes, the well needs work, and the place has been sitting empty since he died." He watched disappointment flicker across Laura's face, quickly masked. "We will manage. We have managed worse." Something in the way she said it told Isaac there was a story there, probably not a pleasant one. He made a decision that surprised him even as the words left his mouth. "I have got a bunkhouse on my property that is sitting empty. My ranch hands moved into the new quarters I built last spring. It is not fancy, but it is solid and clean. You and your mother could stay there while we get your uncle's place fixed up proper. No charge, just neighborly help." Laura stiffened. "We do not accept charity, Mr. Montgomery." "It is not charity," Isaac said evenly, meeting her gaze. "It is good sense. Your mother looks about ready to collapse from the heat, and there is a storm brewing west. You can see the clouds building if you look. That old homestead will not keep the rain out, and I would not be able to sleep knowing I left 2 women to fend for themselves in a structure that is not fit for livestock, much less people." Margaret touched her daughter's arm. "Laura, dear, perhaps we should accept Mr. Montgomery's kindness, just until we can assess the situation properly." Laura looked torn between pride and practicality, her jaw working as she considered. Finally, she gave a short nod. "A few days only until we can see what needs to be done, and we will earn our keep. I can cook, clean, tend animals. My mother makes the finest preserves you have ever tasted, and she can mend anything." "Then it is settled," Isaac said, feeling an unfamiliar lightness in his chest. "Let me get my wagon. You 2 wait here in the shade." As he strode toward the livery where he had left his wagon that morning, Isaac tried to understand what had just happened. He was not an impulsive man. He had built his ranch through careful planning and harder work, had survived the lean years after the war by being practical and cautious. He did not invite strangers to live on his property, did not volunteer for complications. But something about Laura Brennan's fierce protectiveness toward her mother, the way she held her spine straight despite obvious exhaustion, had reached past his usual reserve and found something he thought he had buried years ago. The ride to the ranch took nearly an hour, with Margaret dozing against her daughter's shoulder in the wagon bed, while Laura watched the landscape pass with keen interest. Isaac pointed out landmarks, explaining the lay of the land, where the water sources were reliable, which areas flooded in heavy rains. Laura asked intelligent questions about cattle, crops, the climate, absorbing information with the focus of someone planning for the long term. The ranch house came into view as they crested a rise, a sturdy adobe and wood structure that Isaac had expanded twice over the years. The bunkhouse sat 50 yards away, smaller but well built, with a covered porch and windows that caught the evening breeze. Beyond that stretched the corrals, the barn, the equipment sheds, all the infrastructure of a working ranch that supported 24 head of cattle and a rotating string of horses. "It is beautiful," Laura said softly, and Isaac felt an unexpected surge of pride. He helped Margaret down from the wagon, noting how light she felt, how her breathing seemed labored. Laura noticed too. He saw the worry flash across her face before she masked it. They got Margaret settled on the bunkhouse porch while Isaac and Laura carried in the trunks. The interior was simple but clean, just as Isaac had promised. One large room with a stone fireplace, a separate small bedroom, a table and chairs, a cookstove that Isaac had installed when he first built the place. Laura moved through the space with an appraising eye, and he could almost see her mentally cataloging what she would need, how she would arrange things. "There is a pump just outside, and the water is good," Isaac said. "Outhouse is behind that stand of cottonwoods. I will bring over some firewood and supplies in the morning. For tonight, let me bring you something from my kitchen so you do not have to cook." "Mr. Montgomery," Laura began, but he held up a hand. "Isaac, please, and I insist. You have had a long journey. Let me do this one thing, and then I will leave you in peace." He returned 20 minutes later with a basket containing bread, cold chicken, cheese, apples, and a jar of buttermilk. Margaret was sitting in one of the chairs, looking more alert after washing her face and hands. Laura had changed from her travel dress into a simple cotton work dress, her hair now in a practical braid that hung over her shoulder. "This is very kind," Margaret said, accepting the basket with a grateful smile. "You have a good heart, young man." Isaac felt his ears grow warm. "Just being neighborly, madam. Laura, if you need anything during the night, my house is the one with the lamp in the east window. I keep it burning low so you can find your way if necessary." "Thank you," Laura said, and for the first time since she had stepped off that stage, her expression held something approaching warmth. "Truly." Isaac walked back to his house through the gathering dusk, aware that he was already thinking about the next day, about what he could do to help them, about the way Laura's eyes had softened when she thanked him. He told himself it was simple Christian charity, but some honest part of him knew it was more than that. Sleep came slowly that night. Isaac found himself staring at the ceiling, thinking about the homestead that Samuel Brennan had left behind. He knew exactly how bad the shape was because he had ridden past it several times since Samuel's death, had considered buying the property himself just to keep it from falling into complete ruin. The roof had at least 3 major holes, the chimney was cracked, half the windows were broken, and the barn had partially collapsed. It would take weeks of work to make it habitable, maybe months to make it truly livable. He was up before dawn, as always, moving through his morning chores with practiced efficiency. He fed the horses, checked the cattle in the near pasture, milked the cow he kept for his own use. As the sun crept over the horizon, he saw smoke rising from the bunkhouse chimney and smiled despite himself. Laura was already outside when he approached, pumping water into a bucket. She had her sleeves rolled up, her hair still in that long braid, and she moved with the efficiency of someone accustomed to hard work. "Morning," Isaac called out. "How did you sleep?" "Well enough," Laura replied, straightening. The bed was comfortable, and it was wonderfully quiet after sleeping in way stations and the stage coach. "How is your mother?" A shadow crossed Laura's face. "Tired. The journey was hard on her. She is resting now." Isaac nodded, choosing his words carefully. "I was thinking I might ride out to your uncle's property today, take a proper assessment of what needs doing. If you would like to come along, we could make a list, figure out what materials we will need." Laura wiped her hands on her apron. "I would appreciate that. But I should not leave my mother for too long." "Bring her along," Isaac suggested. "We can take the wagon, make it comfortable for her. The ride is not too rough, and sometimes a little outing does more good than staying cooped up." That was how, an hour later, Isaac found himself driving the wagon towards Samuel Brennan's old homestead with both women as his passengers. Margaret sat between them on the wagon seat, wrapped in a shawl despite the warmth of the morning, while Laura pointed out birds and plants, trying to keep her mother engaged and alert. The homestead looked even worse than Isaac remembered. The house sagged in the middle, the porch rail had come loose, and prairie grass had grown up almost to the windows. Laura's face went carefully blank when she saw it, but Margaret made a small sound of distress. "Oh, Samuel," Margaret whispered. "You always were stubborn about asking for help." Isaac helped both women down from the wagon, then followed as Laura approached the house with determined steps. The door stuck, swollen from moisture and disuse, and he had to put his shoulder to it. Inside was worse than outside. Dust covered everything. Mice had made nests in the corners, and the holes in the roof had let in enough rain to warp the floorboards and stain the walls. Laura walked through each room in silence, her expression growing tighter with each discovery. Margaret stood in the main room, one hand pressed to her mouth, looking around at what should have been their new home. "It is worse than I thought," Laura finally said, her voice flat. "I was foolish to bring us here. We should have stayed in Missouri, should have found some other way." "What were you running from?" Isaac asked gently. Laura's head snapped toward him, her eyes flashing. Then the fight seemed to drain out of her, and she sank onto a dust-covered chair despite the state of it. "My late husband's family. James died 2 years ago from a fever. We had no children, and his parents decided they wanted our house, our land, everything. They made our lives miserable until we had no choice but to sell at a fraction of what it was worth and leave. When Uncle Samuel's letter came, it seemed like Providence. Margaret moved to her daughter's side, placing a weathered hand on Laura's shoulder. "We will make it work, dear. We always do." Isaac looked at the two of them, these women who had traveled halfway across the country on the promise of a better life, only to find this wreck of a house. He thought about his own ranch, built slowly over years, comfortable and solid. He thought about the empty rooms he rarely used, the kitchen that was too large for one person, the way silence had become his constant companion. "I have an idea," he heard himself say. "But I want you to hear me out completely before you say no." Laura looked up at him warily. "What kind of idea?" Isaac leaned against the doorframe, organizing his thoughts. "My house is bigger than I need. 4 bedrooms, and I only use one. A kitchen built for a family, a sitting room that never gets sat in. I built it big because I always thought I would marry, have children, fill those rooms with life. But that has not happened, and I am not sure it will." "Mr. Montgomery," Laura began, but he held up a hand. "Let me finish. I am not suggesting anything improper. What I am thinking is this. You and your mother move into my house. Properly, respectably, as my tenants. You would have your own rooms, your privacy. In exchange, you help with the household work that I am terrible at. Cooking, cleaning, mending, all the things a bachelor lets slide. Meanwhile, I will work on fixing up this place. I've got the skills, and I can spare the time now that autumn is coming and the ranch work slows down. Come spring, when this house is livable, you can move in if you want. Or if you are happy with the arrangement, we continue as we are." "That is too much," Laura said immediately. "We cannot accept that level of generosity. It is not right." "Why not?" Isaac asked. "You would be working for your keep. I would be getting help I genuinely need. And your mother would be living in comfort while she regains her strength from the journey. Where is the shame in that?" Margaret spoke up, her voice thoughtful. "He makes a good argument, Laura, and I confess, the idea of a proper home while we settle in sounds like a blessing. We would not be dependent. We would be contributing." Laura looked between her mother and Isaac, clearly torn. "People will talk. A single woman and her mother moving in with a bachelor. It will cause gossip." "Let them talk," Isaac said with a shrug. "Anyone who knows me knows I am not the sort to compromise a woman's reputation. And anyone who does not know me will not affect my business or my standing in town. I am established here, Laura. I do not need to care what small minds think." He could see the moment she began to waver, the practical side of her nature warring with her pride. Finally, she stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "1 month. We will try this arrangement for 1 month. If it does not work, if there are any problems, we find another solution." "Agreed." "Agreed," Isaac said, extending his hand. Laura shook it, her grip firm and calloused, the hand of someone who knew work. When their palms met, Isaac felt something pass between them, a spark of recognition or connection that made his heart stutter in his chest. From the way Laura's eyes widened slightly, he thought maybe she felt it too. They spent the rest of the morning making a list of everything that would need to be done to make the homestead livable. New roof, new windows, floor repairs, chimney work, a complete cleaning, fresh paint. It was a daunting list, but Isaac found himself looking forward to it, to having a project that mattered, that would help these two women who had already claimed a space in his thoughts he had not known was empty. The ride back to the ranch was quieter, each of them lost in their own thoughts. Margaret dozed again, and Isaac was acutely aware of Laura sitting beside him, the way the wagon's movement occasionally brought their shoulders into contact, the scent of lavender soap that clung to her despite the dust of the old homestead. "Why are you doing this?" Laura asked suddenly, her voice low enough not to wake her mother. "The truth, please." Isaac considered his answer carefully. "The truth is I am not entirely sure, partially because it is the right thing to do, partially because my mother raised me to help where I can. But if I am being completely honest, there is something about you and your mother that makes me want to help. Maybe it is the way you take care of her. Maybe it is the strength I see in you. Maybe it is just that I have been alone too long, and I had forgotten how much better life is when you share it with good people." Laura was quiet for a long moment. "You are either the most genuinely kind man I have ever met, or the most clever manipulator." "I am just a rancher who is mediocre at cooking and terrible at mending," Isaac said with a slight smile. "And who would rather share his home than watch it sit half empty while two women struggle with a house that is not fit for habitation?" "I do not trust easily," Laura said softly. "The last 2 years taught me that people often have hidden motives." "Then trust slowly," Isaac replied. "I can wait." They moved Laura and Margaret into the ranch house that afternoon. Isaac gave them the 2 bedrooms on the east side of the house, the ones that caught the morning sun and had the best cross breeze in summer. He carried their trunks upstairs, then made himself scarce while they unpacked and settled in, busying himself with ranch work that did not actually need doing. When he came in for supper, the house smelled of cooking food for the first time in longer than he could remember. Laura had found the ingredients in his pantry and made a stew with dumplings, fresh bread, and stewed apples. The table was set properly, with napkins and everything in its place. Margaret was already seated, looking more rested than she had since arriving, and Laura was pulling the bread from the oven with practiced ease. "Sit," Laura commanded when she saw him hovering in the doorway. "Supper is ready." It felt strange and wonderful to sit at his own table and have someone serve him food he had not cooked himself. The stew was rich and flavorful, the dumplings light, the bread still warm. Isaac found himself eating more than he usually did, and when Laura offered him a second helping, he accepted without hesitation. "This is delicious," he said honestly. "I have been living on fried beef and beans for so long, I had forgotten what real cooking tastes like." "You poor man," Margaret said with a gentle smile. "No wonder you offered us a place to stay. You were starving for a proper meal." Isaac laughed, surprised at how natural it felt. "You have found out my true motive. It was all about the dumplings." They fell into a routine over the following days that felt both new and oddly familiar. Isaac rose before dawn and worked the ranch, while Laura managed the household with quiet efficiency. She cooked meals that made him look forward to coming inside, kept the house cleaner than it had been in years, and somehow made the whole place feel more like a home than a structure he slept in. Margaret helped where she could, mending his worn shirts, organizing the pantry, sitting on the porch and snapping beans or peeling apples while keeping Laura company. In the evenings, they sat together in the front room, and Isaac found himself talking more than he had in years. Laura asked about the ranch, about his life, about how he had come to El Paso. He told her about growing up in Kentucky, about losing his parents to cholera when he was 20, about drifting west and finally finding a place that felt like it could be home. In turn, Laura spoke about her life in Missouri, about her brief marriage to a man she had cared for but perhaps not loved, about the relief mixed with guilt she felt after his death, about the harassment from his family that had driven her and her mother away. "I thought I was supposed to be devastated," Laura confessed one evening, her hands busy with mending one of his shirts. "But mostly I just felt freed. Does that make me terrible?" "It makes you honest," Isaac replied. "There is nothing wrong with acknowledging the truth of your own feelings." Margaret had already retired for the evening, and the house was quiet around them. The lamp on the table cast a warm glow, and Isaac found himself watching the way the light played across Laura's features as she worked, the small furrow of concentration between her brows, the way she bit her lower lip when she was focused on a particularly tricky stitch. "What about you?" Laura asked, glancing up and catching him watching her. "Why did you never marry? A man with property who is kind and capable, you must have had opportunities." Isaac shifted in his chair. "I came close once, about 5 years back. Her name was Catherine, and she was the daughter of a merchant in town. We courted for nearly a year. But when it came time to actually plan the wedding, she admitted she could not see herself living on a ranch. She wanted city life, wanted social events and shopping and everything El Paso could not provide. I could not be the man she wanted, and she could not be happy with the life I offered. So we parted ways." "That must have hurt," Laura said softly. "It did. But looking back now, I think we both knew it was not right. There was affection, but not passion. Compatibility, but not connection. We would have made each other miserable eventually." Laura set down her mending, meeting his eyes directly. "And what do you want, Isaac Montgomery? If you could have anything, what would it be?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility. Isaac knew he could deflect, could give some vague answer about wanting a successful ranch and a comfortable life. But something about the way Laura looked at him, open and curious and genuinely interested, made him want to tell the truth. "I want what my parents had," he said finally. "They were partners in every sense. They worked together, laughed together, supported each other through hard times. When my father looked at my mother, you could see everything he felt written on his face. When my mother spoke about my father, her voice went soft with affection. I want that. Someone who chooses to build a life with me, not because it is expected or convenient, but because we make each other better. Someone I can trust completely, who trusts me the same way." Laura's expression had gone soft, almost wondering. "That is a beautiful dream. What about you? What do you want?" She was quiet for a long moment, her gaze distant. "I want to never feel powerless again. I want a home that is truly mine, that no one can take away. I want my mother to be safe and comfortable. And I suppose, if I am being completely honest, I want what you described. A true partnership. I had a marriage, but I never had that." Isaac felt something shift between them, a deepening of the connection that had been building since the day they met. He wanted to say something profound, to acknowledge what he was feeling, but the words tangled on his tongue. Instead, he simply nodded and said, "I hope you find all of that." "Maybe I already have," Laura replied, so softly he almost missed it. The next morning, Isaac rode into town to order supplies for the homestead repairs. He visited the lumber yard, the hardware store, and the glass merchant, arranging for materials to be delivered to the ranch over the next week. As he was leaving the hardware store, he ran into Thomas Garrett, a neighboring rancher he had known for years. "Montgomery," Thomas called out, falling into step beside him. "Heard you have got company out at your place. 2 women." Isaac felt his jaw tighten but kept his voice even. "Laura and Margaret Brennan, Samuel Brennan's niece and sister. They came to claim his property, but the place needs extensive work before they can move in. I am providing temporary lodging while I help fix it up." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "That is awful generous of you. Folks in town are talking, you know." "Folks in town should mind their own business," Isaac replied mildly. "The arrangement is perfectly respectable. They have their own rooms, and Laura is helping with household work in exchange for lodging. Anyone who wants to make something improper out of simple Christian charity has a mind too small to bother about." "Easy there," Thomas said, holding up his hands. "I am not judging. Just thought you should know what people are saying. Though between you and me, I think it is decent of you." Samuel's place is barely standing, and those women would have had a hard time of it on their own. Isaac relaxed slightly. Sorry, I suppose I am more sensitive about it than I realized. Nothing to apologize for. Sounds like you have got a good situation. How is Laura at cooking? If she is any good, you are a lucky man. The best I have ever had, Isaac admitted. The woman could make shoe leather taste good. Thomas laughed. Well then, you hold on to that arrangement as long as you can. A man could do worse than having a beautiful woman cooking for him. Isaac felt heat creep up his neck. It is not like that. Maybe not yet, Thomas said with a knowing look. But I have seen the way things develop. You take care, Montgomery, and bring them by sometime. My wife would love to meet them, and it would help quiet the gossip if folks saw they were respectable people. Isaac promised to do so and headed back to the ranch, Thomas's words echoing in his mind. He had been so focused on the practical aspects of the arrangement that he had not fully acknowledged what he was feeling. But the truth was, he thought about Laura constantly. The way she hummed while she cooked, the sound of her laughter when Margaret told stories, the sight of her in his kitchen looking perfectly at home. He looked forward to meal times, to evenings in the front room, to any excuse to be near her. He was falling for her. Maybe had been falling since the moment she stepped off that stage, fierce and protective and unbending in her determination to care for her mother. The realization should have scared him, but instead it felt right, like something clicking into place after being slightly misaligned. When he arrived back at the ranch, Laura was in the garden, weeding the vegetable patch that had been neglected all summer. She had her skirts tied up out of the dirt, and tendrils of hair had escaped her bun to curl around her face. She looked up as he approached, shading her eyes against the sun. "How did it go in town?" she asked. "Good. Materials will start arriving next week. I should be able to start on the roof first, get it watertight before the autumn rains come." Laura straightened, pressing one hand to her lower back. "I have been thinking I want to help. I know how to use a hammer and saw. My father made sure I learned practical skills before he passed. I can at least assist, hand you tools, that sort of thing." "It is hard work," Isaac cautioned. "I am not afraid of hard work," Laura replied, a slight edge to her voice. "I am tired of being treated like I am fragile. I am stronger than I look, and I want to be part of rebuilding my future home." Isaac held up his hands in surrender. "All right, I would be glad for the help. Honestly, it will go much faster with two of us." Laura's expression softened. "Thank you for not arguing. Most men would have told me to stay in the kitchen where I belong." "You have already proven you belong anywhere you decide to be," Isaac said simply. The look Laura gave him then made his heart stutter. It was warm and appreciative, and something more, something that spoke of possibilities neither of them had yet voiced. Then Margaret called from the house that lunch was ready, and the moment passed, but the warmth of it stayed with Isaac all afternoon. The supplies started arriving the following week, and Isaac and Laura began the work of rehabilitating the homestead. They fell into a rhythm, working together from early morning until mid-afternoon, then returning to the ranch to tend to other chores and prepare supper. Margaret stayed at the ranch house, insisting she was perfectly capable of managing on her own for a few hours, and that she enjoyed the quiet to do her handwork. Isaac found that Laura had not exaggerated her capabilities. She wielded a hammer with confidence, measured and cut wood with precision, and did not shy away from climbing ladders or balancing on roof beams. She also had an eye for detail that he appreciated, pointing out problems he might have missed and suggesting solutions that often proved better than his initial ideas. They talked while they worked, sharing stories and opinions, debating everything from politics to religion to the best way to train horses. Isaac discovered that Laura had strong opinions about nearly everything, and was not afraid to voice them. She was intelligent and well-read, passionate about justice and fairness, and had a dry wit that caught him off guard and made him laugh more than he had in years. One afternoon, as they were working on replacing the broken windows, Laura asked suddenly, "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Isaac paused in the middle of applying putty to a window frame. "Sometimes. There is a difference between being alone and being lonely, though. I am alone by choice most of the time. The loneliness comes and goes." "I know what you mean," Laura said, carefully setting a new pane of glass into place. "I felt lonelier in my marriage than I ever have living on my own. Is it strange that I felt more isolated living with someone than I did after he died? Not strange at all. The worst loneliness is being with someone who does not really see you." Laura looked up at him, her hand still holding the glass in place. "You see me?" It was not a question, but Isaac answered anyway. "I do." "That scares me a little," Laura admitted. "I've gotten used to being invisible, to keeping walls up. You slip past those walls without even trying." Isaac set down his putty knife and moved closer, careful not to startle her. "I am scared too, if that helps. I had convinced myself I was fine alone, that I did not need complications. Then you arrived, and suddenly my house feels empty when you are not in it." "Isaac," Laura breathed, his name barely a whisper. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked one of those escaped tendrils of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek, and she leaned into the touch just slightly, her eyes falling closed. "I do not want to rush anything," Isaac said softly. "We have time. But I need you to know that this is not just kindness or charity or convenience for me anymore. I care about you, Laura. More than I probably should after such a short time." Laura opened her eyes, and he could see emotion swirling in their depths. "I care about you too, but I am terrified of making another mistake, of trusting the wrong person again. Then we will go slow. We will build trust the same way we are building this house. One piece at a time, making sure the foundation is solid before we add more. Can you accept that?" "Yes," Laura said, and the relief in her voice told him she had been as worried about this conversation as he had been. "I can accept that." They went back to work, but something had fundamentally shifted between them. There was an openness now, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been building since the day they met. Isaac caught himself watching Laura more openly, and when he did, he often found her watching him back. They worked closer together than strictly necessary, finding excuses for their hands to brush, for their shoulders to touch. When they returned to the ranch that evening, Margaret took one look at them and smiled knowingly, but she said nothing, simply served them supper and entertained them with stories from her childhood. Later, after Margaret had retired for the night, Isaac and Laura sat on the front porch, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. "Tell me something you have never told anyone else," Laura said, her voice quiet in the peaceful night. Isaac thought for a moment. "Sometimes I talk to the horses, not just commands or comments, but real conversations. I tell them my problems, my plans, my feelings. They are excellent listeners." Laura laughed softly. "That is sweet and slightly absurd. Your turn. Something you have never told anyone." Laura was quiet for so long that Isaac thought she might not answer. Finally, she said, "I was relieved when James died, not happy because I would never wish death on anyone, but relieved. And I have carried guilt about that for 2 years, because what kind of person feels relief when her husband dies? A person who was not happy," Isaac said gently. "A person who felt trapped and finally saw a way out. There is no shame in that, Laura." "I needed to hear that," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, then Laura excused herself to bed. But before she went inside, she paused beside Isaac's chair and pressed a gentle kiss to the top of his head. It was brief and innocent, but it set Isaac's heart racing and left him sitting on the porch long after she had gone, one hand pressed to where her lips had touched. The work on the homestead continued over the following weeks. They replaced the entire roof, installed new windows, repaired the floors, and rebuilt the collapsed portion of the barn. Isaac worked harder than he had in years, driven by a desire to give Laura the home she deserved, to prove himself worthy of the trust she was slowly extending. Margaret's health improved with good food and comfortable living. Color returned to her cheeks, and she no longer tired as easily. She took to visiting them at the homestead occasionally, bringing lunch and sitting in the shade while offering suggestions about where things should go, how the garden should be laid out, what colors to paint the rooms. One day, as they were taking a break from painting the kitchen, Margaret said, "You know, Laura, this house is much larger than we need, just the two of us." Laura looked up from stirring the paint, wariness in her expression. "What are you saying, Mother?" "I am saying that I am not blind, dear. I see the way you and Isaac look at each other. I see the way you are both tiptoeing around something that is already happening. Life is too short to waste time being cautious when you have found something real." "It has only been 2 months," Laura protested weakly. "Your father and I knew after 2 weeks," Margaret replied. "Time is not always the best measure of compatibility. Sometimes you just know." Isaac, who had been pretending not to listen while working on the window frames, felt his ears burn, but he did not disagree with Margaret's assessment. Every day with Laura felt right in a way nothing else in his life ever had. She challenged him and comforted him, made him laugh and think, inspired him to be better than he was. That evening, as they rode back to the ranch in the wagon with Margaret dozing between them, Laura said quietly, "My mother is not subtle." "No, she is not," Isaac agreed with a smile. "But she is not wrong either." Laura glanced at him, then away, a flush creeping up her neck. "What are you suggesting?" "I am suggesting that we stop pretending this is temporary, that we acknowledge what is happening between us and see where it leads." "That is terrifying," Laura said. "I know, but I think it will be worth it." Laura reached across her sleeping mother and took Isaac's hand, lacing their fingers together. "All right, let us see where this leads." October arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn in the air. The homestead was nearly finished, transformed from a crumbling wreck into a solid, attractive house. Laura had sewn curtains for the windows, and Margaret had planted mums around the porch that were just beginning to bloom. It looked like a home, and Isaac felt a strange pang of regret about it being finished because it meant Laura and Margaret would move out of his house. As if reading his thoughts, Laura said one evening as they surveyed their work, "I have been thinking about what my mother said. About the house being too large for just the two of us." Isaac's heart began to beat faster. "Oh," she suggested that maybe she should live here in one of the bedrooms and I could remain at the ranch with you. In a proper bedroom, maintaining appearances, until such time as a more permanent arrangement could be made. Isaac turned to face her fully. "What kind of more permanent arrangement?" Laura met his gaze steadily, though her cheeks were pink. "The kind where I stop being your tenant and become your wife, if that is something you would want." "If that is something I would want," Isaac repeated, almost laughing. "Laura, I have wanted that since about 2 days after you arrived. I have been trying to be patient to give you time, but yes. That is absolutely something I want. The question is, do you want it?" Laura stepped closer, reaching up to cup his face with one work-roughened hand. "I did not think I would ever want to marry again. But you are not James. You are kind and patient and good. You see me for who I actually am, not who you want me to be. You have given me and my mother safety and care without asking for anything in return. So yes, Isaac Montgomery, I want to marry you. I think I have wanted it for weeks but was too scared to admit it. Isaac pulled her into his arms, holding her close, feeling her heart beat against his chest. We will do it right. I will court you properly. Ask your mother for her blessing even though she has already made her opinion clear. We will have a proper wedding. Invite the whole town if you want. I want everyone to know that I am proud to have you as my wife. Laura laughed against his shoulder. I do not need the whole town, but a proper wedding sounds nice. And Isaac, I am proud to be yours too. Their first kiss happened naturally, a gentle meeting of lips that spoke of promise and possibility. It was sweet and tender, and when they pulled apart, both of them were smiling. Isaac asked Margaret for her blessing that evening, a formality they all knew was unnecessary, but that felt important nonetheless. Margaret pulled him into a hug and told him she could not have chosen a better man for her daughter if she had handpicked him herself. They were married 6 weeks later in late November at the small church in El Paso. Thomas Garrett and his wife attended, along with a handful of Isaac's friends and business associates, and several of Laura's new acquaintances from town. Margaret cried throughout the ceremony, happy tears that she did not bother to hide. Laura wore a simple but beautiful dress in deep blue, and Isaac wore his best suit, his hair freshly cut and his boots polished to a shine. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Isaac kissed Laura with all the love he had been holding back, and the small congregation burst into applause. They held a simple reception at the ranch, with food that Margaret and Laura had prepared over the preceding days, and neighbors brought dishes to share in the tradition of frontier hospitality. As the sun set and the last guests departed, Isaac and Laura stood on the porch of their home, watching Margaret settle into her own house across the yard. She had insisted on moving to the homestead the week before the wedding, claiming the newlyweds needed privacy, and she needed her independence. The compromise was that she would take her meals at the main house, and they would check on her daily, an arrangement that satisfied everyone. "Are you happy?" Isaac asked, his arm around Laura's waist, holding her close against the November chill. "Happier than I knew I could be," Laura replied, tilting her face up to his. "Thank you for building us a home, Isaac, for welcoming my mother, for seeing family as something to embrace rather than a burden." "Family is everything," Isaac said simply, "and you and Margaret are my family now. You are both welcome here always. This is your home as much as it is mine." They went inside together, closing the door on the cool night, and Isaac built up the fire while Laura made tea. They sat together in the front room that had once felt too empty, now filled with the warmth of shared presence, and talked about their plans for the future. They would expand the ranch, maybe buy additional property. They would care for Margaret, making sure her remaining years were comfortable and happy. They would build a life together, day by day, choice by choice. That night, as Laura fell asleep in Isaac's arms, she whispered, "I love you, Isaac Montgomery." "I love you too, Laura Montgomery," Isaac replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Welcome home." Winter settled over the ranch with gentle snowfalls and crisp, clear days. Isaac and Laura fell into the rhythms of married life with surprising ease. Laura continued to manage the household, but now Isaac worked beside her more often, learning to share the domestic tasks rather than simply being served. He learned to appreciate the simple pleasure of cooking together, of folding laundry side by side, of the companionable silence that came from being truly comfortable with another person. Margaret thrived in her independence, keeping her own house, but joining them for breakfast and supper every day. She and Laura preserved food for the winter, filled the root cellar with vegetables and dried goods, and prepared for the lean months with practiced efficiency. Isaac often came in from working the ranch to find both women in his kitchen, laughing and working together, and the sight never failed to warm him. Christmas came, and they celebrated with a feast that Margaret insisted on preparing as her gift to them. Thomas Garrett and his wife joined them, along with an elderly widower from a neighboring property, and the young couple who ran the general store in town. The house filled with laughter and good food, and Isaac looked around his table at the faces gathered there and felt overwhelming gratitude for the turn his life had taken. "What are you thinking?" Laura asked later that night, as they lay in bed listening to the wind whisper around the eaves. "That I am the luckiest man alive," Isaac replied honestly. "A year ago, I ate Christmas dinner alone. Tonight our house was full of people and life and happiness. You gave me that, Laura." "We gave it to each other," Laura corrected gently. "I was running, scared and lost, trying to protect my mother and myself. You offered us safety and kindness when we desperately needed it. You built us a home, not just the house across the yard, but this, us. A real home." Isaac pulled her closer, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the solid warmth of her against him. "I want to give you more than safety and kindness. I want to give you joy and adventure and everything your heart desires." "You already have," Laura said. "Though if we are talking about what my heart desires, there is one thing. Name it. Children. I know we have not talked about it much, but I want a family with you, Isaac. I want to fill this house with the sound of little feet and laughter. I want to give my mother grandchildren to spoil. I want to build a legacy with you." Isaac felt his throat tighten with emotion. "I want that too, more than I can say." "Then we will have it," Laura said with quiet confidence. "In time, we will have everything." Spring came early in 1879, and with it came the busy season of ranch work. Isaac worked long days, branding cattle, mending fences, preparing for the summer drive to market. Laura worked equally hard, managing the garden, caring for the chickens they had added to the property, helping Margaret with the endless task of keeping 3 households running smoothly. In May, Laura began feeling ill in the mornings, and when the pattern persisted for 2 weeks, she rode into town to see the doctor. When she returned, her eyes were bright with unshed tears, and Isaac's heart seized with worry until she smiled and said, "We are going to have a baby. The doctor thinks it will arrive in January." Isaac lifted her off her feet, spinning her around despite her laughing protests, so full of joy he could barely contain it. Margaret cried when they told her, holding Laura close and thanking God for blessings she had not dared to pray for. The pregnancy was not easy. Laura struggled with sickness that lasted well beyond the first few months, and the summer heat made her miserable and exhausted. Isaac found himself taking over more of the household tasks, learning through trial and error how to manage things he had previously left entirely to his wife. Margaret helped as much as she could, but her own stamina was limited, and Isaac worried about her overextending herself. By August, Laura was confined to bed rest, the doctor concerned about her blood pressure and insisting she needed complete rest. Isaac hired a woman from town to help with the household work, freeing him to spend more time with Laura, reading to her, talking with her, simply sitting with her while she slept. "I am sorry," Laura said one afternoon, tears sliding down her cheeks. "I am useless like this, a burden." "You are growing our child," Isaac replied firmly, wiping away her tears. "That is the most important work there is. Everything else can wait. You just focus on staying healthy and let me worry about the rest." "I am scared," Laura whispered. "Women die in childbirth. What if something goes wrong?" Isaac took her hand, pressing it against his chest so she could feel his heartbeat. Nothing is going to go wrong. You are strong, Laura, the strongest person I know. You are going to be fine, and our baby is going to be fine, and we are going to raise this child together and love them more than life itself. I believe that with everything I am." Laura clung to his hand, drawing strength from his certainty. "Promise me something. If it comes down to a choice, you save the baby. Promise me." "I promise no such thing," Isaac said fiercely. "I will not lose you, Laura. I cannot. Do not ask me to make that choice." "Isaac, no, you both come through this safely, or I will never forgive either of you for leaving me. That is the only acceptable outcome." Despite the heaviness of the conversation, Laura laughed weakly. "You are the most stubborn man I have ever met." "I learned from the most stubborn woman I have ever met," Isaac countered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Now rest. Doctor's orders." As autumn gave way to winter, Laura's health stabilized somewhat. She was able to be up and about for short periods, though she tired easily, and the doctor insisted she continue to take things slowly. Isaac found himself constantly torn between the demands of the ranch and his desire to be near his wife, but Laura insisted he maintain his normal routine. "The ranch is our livelihood," she reminded him when he resisted leaving her to work. "And sitting here watching me rest will drive us both mad. Go, do what needs doing. Your mother is here, and we will call for you if anything changes." So Isaac worked, but he worked closer to the house, finding tasks that kept him within earshot, checking on Laura every few hours with excuses about needing water or tools or advice on some decision. Laura saw through every excuse but allowed them, understanding his need to reassure himself that she was all right. Christmas came again, but they celebrated quietly, just the three of them, with Laura propped up on the sofa and Margaret fussing over her like a mother hen. Isaac gave Laura a rocking chair he had built himself during the long evenings, crafted from smooth oak and designed to be comfortable for nursing the baby. Laura cried when she saw it, hormones and love making her more emotional than usual. "It is perfect," she whispered, running her hands over the smooth wood. "You made this." "Every piece," Isaac confirmed. "I wanted our child's first memories to include you holding them in something I built with my own hands. I wanted them to know their father loved their mother enough to spend hours making something just for her comfort." "They will know," Laura promised. "Every day of their life, they will know how much their parents love each other and them." The baby came on a cold January night, 3 weeks earlier than expected. Laura's water broke while they were eating supper, and Isaac sent one of the ranch hands racing to town for the doctor, while he and Margaret helped Laura to the bedroom and began preparing for the birth. The labor was long and difficult. Laura labored through the night and into the following day, her strength flagging as hour piled upon hour. The doctor arrived and took charge, but even he looked concerned as the afternoon wore on, and the baby showed no signs of coming. Isaac held Laura's hand through it all, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement, praying harder than he had ever prayed in his life. Margaret stood on Laura's other side, coaching her through contractions, reminding her to breathe, offering the kind of steady support that only a mother could provide. Finally, as the sun was setting on the second day, the baby came. A boy, red-faced and squalling, perfect in every way. The doctor placed him on Laura's chest, and Isaac watched his wife fall in love with their son in an instant, her exhausted face transforming with wonder and joy. "Hello, little one," Laura whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "We have been waiting for you." Isaac could not speak, could barely breathe around the emotion clogging his throat. He reached out with trembling hands to touch his son, marveling at the tiny fingers and impossibly small nose, the shock of dark hair and the eyes that would not focus on anything yet, but seemed to look right into his soul. He needs a name, Margaret said softly, tears streaming down her face. Laura looked up at Isaac. We said we would choose together. I was thinking Isaiah, Isaac said. It means salvation of the Lord. After what we just went through, it feels appropriate. Isaiah Montgomery. Isaiah, Laura repeated, testing the name. I love it. Isaiah Thomas Montgomery, after your father and the neighbor who has been so kind to us. The baby, as if in agreement, yawned and settled against Laura's chest, already seeking milk with instinctive determination. The doctor pronounced both mother and baby healthy, gave instructions for the next few days, and departed with a generous payment and an invitation to return for a celebratory dinner once Laura was recovered. Margaret stayed with them that first night, helping with the baby, making sure Laura rested, giving Isaac a crash course in infant care that left his head spinning. But by morning, she retreated to her own house, insisting the new parents needed time to bond with their son. The first weeks were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Isaiah was a good baby, but he was still a baby, waking every few hours to eat, needing to be changed and held and soothed. Isaac and Laura took turns walking the floor with him at night, marveling at every sound and movement, convinced their son was the most remarkable child ever born. I never knew I could love someone this much this fast, Isaac confessed one night, holding Isaiah against his shoulder while Laura rested. Looking at him, I understand why you wanted me to promise to save him if it came to a choice. I would do anything for this child. We would do anything for him, Laura corrected softly. But thankfully we both survived, and now we get to raise him together. We get to show him what love looks like, what family means. We get to give him everything we wished we had had. As Isaiah grew, he became the center of their world. Margaret doted on him shamelessly, spoiling him with knitted blankets and hand-sewn clothes, spending hours rocking him and singing lullabies. The ranch hands took turns coming up to the house to catch a glimpse of the boss's son, offering awkward congratulations and rough carved toys that Isaac suspected they made during slow afternoons in the bunkhouse. By spring, Laura had recovered her strength, and Isaiah was sleeping longer stretches at night, giving them precious hours to reconnect as a couple. They fell back into their routines with adjustments for their son, learning to balance the demands of ranch, household, and parenthood. One evening in early summer, as they sat on the porch watching Isaiah play with wooden blocks while Margaret supervised, Laura said, "I want another one." Isaac looked at her in surprise. "Another baby, already?" "Not immediately," Laura clarified with a laugh. "But yes, eventually. I do not want Isaiah to be an only child. I want him to have siblings to play with, to fight with, to love. I want a big family, Isaac. Is that all right with you?" "More than all right," Isaac replied, pulling her close. "I want everything with you, Laura. As many children as we are blessed with, as many years as we are given. I want a lifetime of this." Laura rested her head on his shoulder, watching their son babble at a butterfly that had landed near his blanket. "Do you ever think about that day I arrived? How different things could have been if you had not offered to help all the time," Isaac admitted. "If I had not been in town that day, if I had not spoken up, if you had refused my help, any of those things and none of this would exist. I would still be alone and you would be struggling to make that homestead livable. We would have missed this." "Fate," Laura said simply. "It had to be fate. The timing, the circumstances, everything aligned perfectly to bring us together. I do not believe in coincidence anymore. I believe you were meant to be standing outside that general store when I arrived. I believe we were always meant to find each other." "Then I am grateful to fate," Isaac said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "And I promise to spend every day earning the gift of your love." "You already have," Laura replied. "Every single day you already have." The years that followed were full and rich. Laura had 3 more children, each pregnancy easier than the one before. A daughter named Lily arrived 2 years after Isaiah, with her mother's dark eyes and stubborn chin. Twin boys, Ethan and Elijah, came 3 years later, keeping everyone on their toes with their endless energy and mischief. The ranch prospered under Isaac's careful management and Laura's business acumen. She had a head for numbers and helped him expand their operations, buying additional land, increasing the herd, establishing contracts with buyers in larger cities. They built a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing, and the Montgomery Ranch became one of the most successful in the region. Margaret lived to see all 4 of her grandchildren born, spending her final years surrounded by love and family. She passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, and they buried her in the small cemetery outside El Paso with a headstone that read, "Beloved mother and grandmother, her love built this family." The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Isaiah was serious and responsible, already showing signs of becoming a skilled rancher like his father. Lily was fierce and independent, more interested in horses than dolls, already declaring she would run her own ranch someday. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into adventures that aged their parents prematurely. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Laura back to the old homestead that had brought her to Texas. They had maintained it over the years, using it for storage and occasionally housing ranch hands, but it still held special significance as the place where their journey truly began. "Remember how terrible this looked when you first saw it?" Isaac asked, wrapping his arms around his wife from behind as they stood in the main room. "I wanted to cry," Laura admitted. "I had pinned all my hopes on this place and it was falling apart. I thought I had made a terrible mistake bringing my mother here. And instead, you found me." "Instead, I found you," Laura agreed, turning in his arms to face him. "You built us a bigger home, Isaac, not just the house, but a life. You welcomed my mother when most men would have seen her as a burden. You chose us, chose family, and gave us everything we needed to thrive. You gave me love I did not think existed outside of fairy tales." Isaac cupped her face in his hands, looking into eyes he had been privileged to wake up to for 10 years, eyes that still made his heart race. "You gave me purpose, Laura. You turned my house into a home, my existence into a life. You gave me children I love more than I knew possible, and every day with you is better than the one before. I love you more now than I did the day we married, and I will love you more tomorrow than I do today." "That is quite a promise," Laura said, her eyes bright with unshed tears of happiness. "It is the only promise that matters," Isaac replied, and kissed her with all the passion and tenderness of a man who knew exactly how lucky he was. They walked back to the main house as the sun set, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and pink. Smoke rose from the chimney, and they could hear the children's laughter drifting on the evening breeze. Their home, their family, their life together spread out before them in all its chaotic, beautiful glory. "Family is everything," Isaac said softly as they paused on the porch, looking out over all they had built together. "Family is everything," Laura echoed, taking his hand. "And we have everything that matters." They went inside together, closing the door on the cooling evening, ready to share supper with their children, to help with homework and settle bedtime squabbles, to do all the ordinary and extraordinary things that made up a life well lived. The stage that had brought Laura and Margaret to El Paso all those years ago was long gone, replaced by trains and faster travel. But the journey it had begun continued, not measured in miles but in moments, in the steady accumulation of days lived with purpose and love. Isaiah Montgomery had been a rancher building a business when Laura Brennan arrived. Now he was a husband, a father, a man whose legacy would be measured not just in acres and cattle, but in the family he had welcomed, nurtured, and loved with everything he had. He had built them a bigger home in every sense that mattered, and in doing so, had found his own true home in their hearts. The Wild West was changing, becoming less wild with each passing year. But in this corner of Texas, on a ranch where love had taken root and grown strong, the values that had built the frontier endured. Hard work, loyalty, family, and the belief that offering kindness to strangers could change the course of lives in ways both simple and profound. Years later, when their children were grown and building lives of their own, when grandchildren came to visit and fill the house with noise again, Isaac and Laura would sit on that same porch and remember. They would talk about the day she arrived with her elderly mother in tow, about the cowboy who chose to build a bigger home because family was everything, about the love that grew from kindness and became the foundation of a legacy that would endure for generations. And they would hold hands, these two souls who had found each other against all odds, and know with absolute certainty that every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of struggle had been worth it for the life they had built together. Their story became the kind that families told around dinner tables, the kind that reminded people why love mattered, why family was worth fighting for, why welcoming strangers with open hearts could lead to blessings beyond measure. The Montgomery Ranch continued to prosper, passing from Isaac and Laura to their children and eventually to their grandchildren. But more than land or wealth, the family passed down the values that had created it all, the belief in hard work and honesty, the commitment to helping those in need, the understanding that family was not just blood, but choice, built through daily acts of love and care. The certainty that a home was not just a structure, but a feeling, created by the people who filled it with laughter and warmth and belonging. And at the heart of it all was a love story, simple and profound, about a woman who arrived seeking refuge and a man who offered everything he had, about an elderly mother who was welcomed rather than tolerated, about the family they built together through commitment and care. It was a story that proved what Isaac had known from the first day he saw Laura step off that stage, that the best things in life come not from what we accumulate, but from what we choose to give away, not from protecting what we have, but from opening our doors and our hearts to those who need us most. In the end, Isaac Montgomery's greatest accomplishment was not the successful ranch or the wealth he accumulated. It was the family he built, the love he nurtured, and the home he created where everyone was welcome, everyone was valued, and everyone knew beyond doubt that they belonged. It was the legacy of a man who understood a fundamental truth that would echo through generations. Family is everything, and when you welcome love into your life with open arms, you receive more than you could ever give.